Well, welcome everybody. We are so excited to have the opportunity to welcome almost all of the candidates running for Council District 5. And we just want to say Christina Irwin at the last minute had to drop out for a family emergency. We hope that everything is okay. But we are so excited to have Molly Basler, Jimmy Biblarz, Scott Epstein, Katy Yaroslavsky, and Sam Yebri with us. So here's what we're going to do this evening. We are going to give a little bit of context and history on mobility and transportation, both in CD5 as well as in Los Angeles. We're going to hear from the candidates. They'll have 1 minute each to give an opening statement. And then we're going to go for about 40 minutes through a list of 5 curated questions that the Streets for All Steering Committee created. That'll be followed by 30 minutes of audience Q&A, 1 minute closing statements from each candidate, and we're going to do a poll at the end to see which candidate had the most inspiring ideas. We are going to try to stay strict on the time because we want to get to as many questions as possible. So the answers for the questions that are asked will also be 1 minute. So please try to stay within that 1 minute. So with that, I'm going to start by giving a little bit of context and history. Some of us are really in this world and know a lot of this, some of us don't, but we thought it would be helpful. So we're going to start with some facts. Traffic in Los Angeles costs our economy $19 billion per year in lost productivity. So it's not just a frustrating thing, it's also a very expensive thing in Los Angeles. We have one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Traffic is so stressful that on extra heavy traffic nights, domestic violence goes up by 9% on our worst traffic days. So we're so stressed out, we're beating each other up. A pedestrian is killed by a car in the city of Los Angeles once every 3 days on average. The average bus speed in Los Angeles travels at 10.8 miles per hour. That's the same as a chill bike ride or a scooter ride. Wheelchair users are especially at risk. They have a 36% higher likelihood of being killed in a car pedestrian crash compared to non-wheelchair users. 2/3 of all trips made in our city are less than 5 miles. Living in Los Angeles, you smoke up to 4 cigarettes per day just by breathing. Of course, that includes our kids. We have a pedestrian fatality rate nearly 4 times the national average. And the LA Basin ranks the worst in the nation for year-round ozone emissions and 5th worst for particle pollution. We don't have to live this way. There could be a better way. And our city has tried to create a better way many times over decades. And our city loves plans and loves studies, but it's the implementation part that we really struggle on. In 1977, there was a bike plan that laid out 673 miles of bikeways. And between 1977 and 1996, we installed 5 miles out of the planned 673. Then in 1996, we planned 1,680 miles, and we installed 104 in the 14 years between 96 and 2010. 2010, we basically dusted off the 96 plan, added a little bit, tried to do it again. We got another 100 miles in those 5 years between 2010 and 2015. That leads us to the 2035 mobility plan passed in 2015 with 500 miles of planned bike lanes, and to date we've installed 37. This is what our city's mobility plans look like. On the left, you see 500 miles of bike lanes planned. Many people don't even know we have a mobility plan, but this has been adopted by City Council. It's part of the general plan of the city of Los Angeles. And whether you like to bike or have never been on a bike in the city, if our bike network looked like that, a lot more people would be biking here. We certainly have the weather for it. On the bus side, on the right-hand side, you see 208 miles of bus lanes planned. Again, it's not a full network, but it's a lot better than what we have today. The dark green on the left, overlaid on top of the plans, is 37 miles of what we've actually implemented. So very, very little implementation, and worse, we've ignored it a lot. On the right side with bus lanes, 208 miles, we've implemented 30. So we have a lot of work to do. And going to the bike lane specifically, how does the city implement bike lanes? Well, first of all, the pavement has to be perfect. The city has been sued a number of times by people that have gotten hurt riding a bike and gotten caught in imperfect pavement. So now they only stripe new bike lanes when the pavement is perfect, which means when the street's being repaved. The council office has to be interested That's not a scientific term. That's just something that the city uses casually. Then the council office arbitrarily says, this is what I want to see. I want 3 meetings, 10 meetings, this survey, go talk to these people. It's very arbitrary. LADOT spends months or years in some cases making the council office happy. And then if or when the council office signs off, the project is then implemented. And this is a very inefficient way to do it. This is block by block, mile by mile, street by street, in a process that is fairly broken just to implement our own plan. There is a better way. Also, I wanted to show everybody within CD5, we have something called the high injury network. The high injury network is 6% of the streets that you have 70% of the injuries and deaths in Los Angeles. So the extra dangerous streets. There's a lot of streets in CD5 that are on the high injury network. You've got Pico, Venice, La Cienega, Westwood, Santa Monica, parts of 6th Street, 3rd Street, Fairfax, and more. So this is not a safe place to walk, to bike, to scoot, do anything except really be in a car. And there's been a lot of missed opportunities over the years. In 2011, Councilmember Koretz didn't allow contiguous bus lanes on Wilshire Boulevard. So if you're a transit rider around Selby, you going east, they just stop and the bus has to merge into traffic and it starts again around the golf course. In 2016, the council member removed the bike lane on Westwood Boulevard that would have connected UCLA better to what is now the Expo line from the mobility plan. In 2019, there was a problem on Melrose specifically, one of the most popular scooter corridors of the city, with scooter riders riding on the sidewalk. And rather than trying to make safe space in the street, that's why they were on the sidewalk, they were scared of getting hit by a car, they had a police task force that was giving scooter riders $200 and $300 tickets for riding on the sidewalk. And the council member also tried to just outright ban scooters. In 2020, the mobility plan was ignored once again on Sepulveda Boulevard near the Getty Center. The street was repaved. There's a bike lane on the plan. That bike lane didn't materialize. In 2020, Paul Koretz killed funding for Uplift Melrose, what you see in the background. Also in 2020, busy year, he did not allow the mobility plan's bike and bus lanes to proceed when they repaved Venice Boulevard in Palms. That Venice Boulevard has dedicated bus lanes and protected bike lanes. And in 2021, this year, just a couple months ago, a woman was killed on Olympic Boulevard by a driver going over 100 miles per hour. And if you've been on Olympic, like I'm sure we all have, it's basically a wide open highway, very wide street. And instead of thinking to perhaps re-engineer the street, he led the charge to get speed feedback signs implemented on Olympic in response to a death. So we could do a lot better in CD5. So with that history and context, we're now going to turn it over to the candidates, which is why you guys are here, not to hear me talk, but to hear them talk. And each candidate is going to get 1 minute to give an opening statement, introduce themselves, say whatever they'd like to say. I'm going to go ahead and start this timer. The way we're going to do this, you can see the order at the bottom. So Molly is going to go first here. And then for the next question, Jimmy will go first. The one after that, Scott will go first, et cetera. And we'll just keep rotating it. So with that, wanted to welcome everybody, and I'm going to turn it over to Molly.
Thank you so much. My name is Molly Basler, and I'm running for City Council District 5 to be of service to the people. And I am a community organizer, an activist, a climate reality leader trained by Al Gore. And I'm an environmentalist, activist. I've been marching. I lift my voice for people, planet, and animals whenever I can. I'm also a small business owner. I'm running also to engage people in city government, and I believe we're able to hear the totality of perspectives in LA. We'll find that bus and bike infrastructure is less contentious than are led to believe. I'm also a bike rider, and I want to find ways of different ways of traveling right through the city that is environmentally sound and safe. And especially, I have stopped riding my bike because of safety. So I have some great ideas to share with you on how I can change the way we ride our bikes and the bus system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jimmy.
I think after this 2 years, I would learn to unmute. Hi everyone, I'm Jimmy Biblarz. My pronouns are he, him, his, and Since we'll be talking about land use tonight, I think it's important to acknowledge that the LA Basin is traditional Native American Tongva land. I grew up in Pico Robertson and went to Hamilton High School in the heart of Jewish LA. When I was 12, my family was evicted from our half of a small duplex. And in the aftermath of the eviction, both of my parents struggled very seriously with substance use. The experience was a real political awakening for me. I knew even then that this just wasn't right, and I've been fighting inequality ever since. I'm running to make LA a place where everyone can afford to thrive. Part of that vision is a city where people come before cars and where public space is plentiful and accessible to all. Every bus stuck in traffic is a policy failure. We are about getting to the heart of the issues. No more Band-Aids for lasting problems. This means talking about housing and transit as interconnected. As Jane Jacobs taught us almost 100 years ago, people crave more walkable streets. Nothing makes us feel safer. I'm very excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Had the same problem Jimmy did. Scott, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Scott Epstein, and I am a community leader and award-winning mobility advocate running to build a more just, sustainable, and healthy LA and CD5. I want to extend a huge thank you to Streets for All for hosting this forum on a topic very near and dear to my heart. Michael went into some of this, but transportation produces more CO2 than any other sector in California. LA's streets are some of the most dangerous in the nation. After decades of improvement in air quality, our air is actually getting worse again. Traffic violence is the #1 cause of death for our children. It is time that we get serious about redesigning our public rights of way to prioritize safety and equity. We can only do that by making room for people on foot, bike, and transit. I'll make it happen in CD5. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks so much.
Katy.
Hi, everyone. I'm a climate attorney, a policymaker, and a mom to 3 little kids. And I'm running because I want LA to remain a place where we all can thrive. But we need effective, ethical, and proven leadership to make that happen. I spent a decade in the private sector as a land use lawyer and then the general counsel of a climate change nonprofit. And for the last 6 years, I've been LA County Supervisor Sheila Kuehl's senior environmental deputy, focused on climate and regional policymaking. I created a utility, LA County's first sustainability office, and one of the region's largest jobs and infrastructure programs, Measure W. Importantly for our conversation today, one of my biggest priorities is to make LA climate resilient, which we'll never be able to achieve unless we can get lots of Angelinos out of their cars more. I have a record of creating coalitions and problem solving. It's why I have the support of Congresswoman Karen Bass, Supervisor Kuehl, Assembly members Laura Friedman and Isaac Bryan, Megan Solly Wells, and lots of community and environmental leaders. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet you tonight.
Thank you. And Sam.
Hello, my name is Sam Yebri, and I love Los Angeles. This city has enabled me and my family to live the American dream. My parents and I arrived in Los Angeles when I was a year old as refugees from Iran. I went from 3 public schools in the district to Yale and then USC for law school. 11 years ago, I was proud to start my own law firm here in the district, where I fought for tenants, workers, refugees, and individuals with disabilities. Over the last 15 years, I've served on numerous nonprofit boards and city commissions. Meanwhile, my wife and I and our 4 young kids have watched our beloved city decline on every issue, an explosion of homelessness, crime, and corruption. And as Michael laid out, missed opportunities on issues of mobility and transportation. City Hall has failed us, and that's why I'm running for City Council, to fight for the city that we deserve. And I'm committed to running a different type of campaign, one that puts families and communities first. That's why I'm not accepting money from real estate developers, PACs, or any special interests of any kind. Our campaign will bring new perspectives to challenge the status quo. I look forward to our discussion tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for all being so sticking to that 1 minute. We appreciate it. All right. Jumping into questions. So this is going to go around the steering committee. I've got the first one. Let me go ahead and put this up here. Okay. So our first question is really how you think about transportation. So as you think about transportation in Los Angeles, it's obvious that prioritizing cars has been our city's modus operandi for the past 80 years. It's evident in everything from parking minimums to street design. And while some may say, of course we prioritize cars, there's no other way to get around LA, others would say that more people don't use the bus because it's slow and inconvenient and it doesn't have its own lanes. And more people don't bike because they feel like they're going to die with the lack of safe bike infrastructure. Do you believe the time has come for the city to think differently about transportation? And if so, what do you see yourself doing differently as an elected council member compared to the way things have been done in the past in CD5? So on this one, we're going to go to Jimmy first.
Thank you so much for that question, Michael. To answer it most directly, I absolutely think that the time has come for change in LA. It's absolutely unsustainable. And you hear these mythologies floated around. LA is a car city. LA can only rely on cars. We'll never have a bus system that is thriving and that people actually want to take. And that just continues down these negative misconceptions and deny the transit experience of millions of Angelenos. As much as we're a car city, we're a metro city, we're a pedestrian city, we're a bike city. And modes of transportation that aren't cars are predominantly utilized by low-income people and people of color. And to state that we're only a car city is just completely missing that transit experience. So in terms of things I would do differently, first, thinking much more robustly about complete streets, thinking about how major thoroughfares, Robertson Boulevard, Westwood Boulevard, can accommodate rapid bus lanes with signal priority, protected bike lanes that people actually feel safe utilizing, and that have residential and commercial real estate combined that improves the housing situation alongside the transit situation. Couple that with real investments in neighborhood services, especially in the lower income parts of CD5 like Palms, and that's my vision for CD5. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Scott.
The answer is yes. It is well past time that we think differently about transportation, and it's necessary. The health of our city depends on it. The health of our world depends on it. We are killing our planet with tailpipe emissions. And so we need to do some things differently. Luckily, we have the most progressive mobility plan the city has ever seen, which is sitting on a shelf, not implemented. It's actually a pretty good blueprint for how we move forward. And the heart of it is a robust, low-stress bikeway system and a rapid transit system that is low cost and can get us a lot of the way towards building a more healthy city. We need to start implementing those programs. And we have a lot of opportunities in Los Angeles and in CD5, from Uplift Melrose to adding, busways on places like Santa Monica Boulevard and Venice Boulevard.
Thank you, Scott. Katy?
So yes, not surprisingly, perhaps I agree that we have to think differently about it. As others have already said, transportation reform is an equity issue. It's a public health imperative, and it's a climate emergency. And the only way we're going to meet our climate goals is by making it more attractive and easier for people to get out of their cars if they so choose. Scott already mentioned the mobility plan. I think that's a really good start. This next city council member has an opportunity to ask LADOT to undertake a new bike plan network and figure out how it's going to connect with all of our neighboring jurisdictions, because CD5 is not an island. We need to focus on, as others have said, making rapid transportation more affordable, building out protected, dedicated bike lanes that get people to job centers and between where they live and job centers, and then creating more inviting pedestrian experience.
Thank you. Sam?
Absolutely, yes. One of Los Angeles' great failures has been our leaders' refusal to plan and build, from a transportation and mobility perspective, the type of city that we want and deserve, and frankly are envious when we travel the world. One with a robust public transportation system that gets you where you want to go fast and safely. One that has ample alternatives to cars. One where we can walk to local parks. Only 60% of Angelenos live within a 10-minute walk of parks. And there's enormous consequences for these failures. From an environmental perspective, as a father of a young son with asthma, I take that very personally and seriously. from a pedestrian and bike safety perspective, from an economic perspective. Michael told us there's $19 billion in loss every year, and from a quality of life perspective. But during the pandemic, we got a taste of what life could be with reduced vehicle traffic, slow streets, more walking, more biking, more telecommuting. But we have a long way to go. And as someone who hasn't had a car for 7 years now, I can tell you that it is exceedingly difficult and cumbersome to navigate our public transportation system, and life is dangerous for walkers and streets and cyclists, and we have to do better, and I will.
Thank you. And Molly.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Do I believe the city needs to think differently about transportation? The mobility plan in 2035 is good, but we need to move it up to 2030. And I think also we need our leaders. Like, I would lead by example. Like, I would ride my bike if elected to City Hall. I will take the bus if it runs on time. So these are things, I think leaders, we need to lead by example. And we need to move into completely electric vehicles, electric buses, I think sooner than later. I don't know why, I know they are doing that, but things, as you had shown that slide before, yeah, we talk a lot, but there's not a lot of action. So what I would do differently is get into action. I would be an example. I also believe bike lanes, adding them to sidewalks in areas of LA that are nice and wide and are less traveled by pedestrians. I've been looking at the city. So I have all these great ideas to inspire people to get out of their cars. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Adrian, who's going to ask our next question.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Adrian Hoff, and I'm on the steering committee of Streets for All. We did some political polling this summer, and we asked some likely voters in the city of Los Angeles the following question. Do you feel it is the responsibility of the mayor and city council to help reduce car traffic, clean our air, and make our streets and sidewalks safer and more livable, delivering visible, measurable changes that we as residents can see on our streets every day? 84% said yes, they hold the mayor and city council responsible. As a city council member, you would be the face of these changes in your district. What transportation and street space ideas or changes would you promote in CD5? Feel free to list specific streets or projects if you have them in mind.
Thank you. Starting with Scott this time.
So I have no shortage of ideas. They would include fully implementing Uplift Melrose, making a safe bikeway between the Expo line and UCLA. But one of the things that I'm thinking about recently is Santa Monica Boulevard. Our signature event for our campaign is a monthly urban hike. And in November, we're going to be doing a Century City to Westwood Boulevard hike, mostly along Santa Monica Boulevard. Santa Monica once had rail running down it. It was a Pacific Electric streetcar route, but now it's essentially designed as a freeway. It's very challenging to cross. Buses have no dedicated right of way. Only the bravest of cyclists dare to ride on the skinny bike lane next to traffic. It's also flanked by multifamily housing and no walkable services like parks, cafes, or libraries. How could we see this differently? I believe Santa Monica Boulevard could become a complete street, including a linear park that would rival projects like the High Line in New York City. The opportunities are right before us if we care to grasp them.
Thank you, Scott. Katy?
Sure. So a bunch of things, but I'll just focus on a couple. I think we need protected bike lane all the way from UCLA down to the Expo line. We should do a parking analysis just to make sure that there's adequate parking, and we should figure out how to make sure that businesses are on board. But evidence shows that when you increase pedestrian activity, business improves. I also think that one of the cool things about COVID was we experimented a little bit with outdoor dining, and I think we should do what we can to make that permanent. And then I also think, we have all these slow streets now. We should make that permanent as well and connect them to each other. It's sort of a a disparate system that we should connect and make permanent, and then be strategic about how we think about protected bike lanes on major thoroughfares. But there are a bunch of places where I'd like to do that too.
Thank you. Sam?
Right. Obviously, reducing vehicle traffic is a top priority for us in Los Angeles. We've talked about the reasons from a climate perspective, public safety, productivity, and quality of life. I think the name of the organization really is appropriate here, right? Streets for All. That's exactly what we can accomplish together by redesigning our transit corridors so that cars, buses, cyclists, pedestrians can share our streets. I have lots of ideas for Melrose and Pico and throughout the district, but I'll focus on Westwood Village, which is really close to my heart. 25% of the land in Westwood Village is devoted to cars. That's parking, that's streets. We have to open that up to create a pedestrian-friendly business district and neighborhood. There's actually been an idea since 1982 to create a plaza in Broxton, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm actually going to make it happen. It's time for reality, for this to become a reality. We will, if built, the Broxton Plaza would be the largest pedestrian plaza in the city of Los Angeles. It's time for us to restore Westwood Village and most of City 5 for people, not cars.
Thank you. Molly?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
So I've been looking into this Metro Micro, which I think is a really great idea, and it's affordable, but I would make them all electric. As I've said, everything, we need to be moving into EVs. Bus and bike, dedicated and protected bike lanes along Westwood Boulevard. And, I travel a lot up Wilshire Corridor and around Holmby Park and all that. There's large amount of sidewalk that can be created into a bike lane and a pedestrian walkway all through Santa Monica up through Century City. So I've been thinking about that. Because there's plenty of room, even up Sepulveda, there's a lot of empty space. So instead of making it unsafe, we get them bike riders off the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy?
So first, we have to start talking about housing and transit as interconnected issues. If we don't, we're missing one of the two main levers that create such tremendous inequality in our community. That requires investing in complete streets, underutilized transit corridors like Robertson, Westwood, Ventura. We can imagine the great neighborhoods of the world, Greenwich Village, Newbury Street in Boston. They have protected bike lanes, rapid bus lanes with signal priority, like they just accomplished really successfully in Indianapolis, a tree canopy, walkability, large sidewalks, and alfresco dining, where housing sits atop residential. It's an amazing combination of the greatest social ills facing our city. So that requires transit changes in addition, like I mentioned, rapid bus lanes, solidifying slow streets and alfresco, and having protected bike lanes along major transit corridors. We also need to talk about incentivizing transit access, disincentivizing car use, and reducing the heavy subsidies that go to car owners. They're often invisible, but talk to Donald Shoup at UCLA and he'll give you a couple hours of his time. We got to improve the organization of LA's transit offices, talk about merging the Department of Transportation and the Bureau of Street Services, and stop buying into myths like freeway widening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our next question, turning it over to Katrina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Kaiser. In addition to being on the steering committee for Streets for All, I'm also a Palms neighborhood voter and member of the Transportation Committee for the Neighborhood Council. And I'm here to talk to you all about improving transportation. It's tough to be a transit rider in CD5. Buses rarely have their own lane and get stuck behind private cars that they have to share a lane with at rush hour. Santa Monica, Olympic Pico, and Venice have no dedicated bus lanes. Wilshire has some, but they stop at Selby and Westwood. City Council unanimously passed the Mobility Plan 2035 in 2015, and that includes 200 miles of bus lanes. However, only 30 miles or 14% have been implemented. As council member, will you let LADOT and Metro implement the Mobility Plan's bus lanes in CD5, even if it comes at the expense of car space? Would you continue the bus lane on Wilshire through Westwood so it's contiguous from the 405 to Beverly Hills? And lastly, what is your response to critics who point to declining bus ridership as a reason to ignore these projects?
Thanks, Katrina. So
Thanks,
to
Katrina.
your first question, sorry, I'm not supposed to start yet, am I, Michael?
Please go ahead.
So yes, I think we need to implement the plan for bus lanes throughout the city. Doing it piecemeal doesn't work, because the goal of all of this needs to be to make it easier and more appealing for people to get out of their cars and on buses if they're able to. Yes, we should make contiguous the Wilshire bus lane. And I can't remember what the last question was.
What do you say to people that point to declining bus ridership as a reason to not make those changes?
Yeah, bus ridership's declining because it's incredibly unappealing to take the bus. There are huge delays. It's very unpleasant to wait, often in the sun, but sometimes in the rain. We need to have dignified bus shelters where we have real-time data, a place to sit, shade. These are all really important, and we're updating our contract with the city and private advertisers, and we should throw in some of our own money so that we can make sure that they're up to par.
Thanks. Sam?
Yeah, so from the first step here is the bus is the most important and equitable mode of transportation we have for people, and increasing ridership is imperative for our city. How do we do that? We increase the frequency. We need a lot more buses. Right now, there's a harsh punishment if you miss your bus. We have to make it clean and safe and really comfortable for folks to get out of their cars. I support having more dedicated bus lanes throughout where it makes sense. Bus shelters are imperative, and so are more trees, frankly. Only 25% of bus stops in Los Angeles have any shelters. We need that for shade, for rain.
Anyway.
And obviously trees will purify our air as well. I do think we need to extend our bus lanes throughout the West Side. I will sit down with the folks at the Metro and the folks at DOT and the folks who are really passionate about biking, neighbors, UCLA, and figure out a way to do this and move it forward. Enough with the talking, enough with the plans. We have to make this a reality for us and then for our kids.
Thank you. Molly?
Yeah, hi. I mean, we need to ensure the current bus fleet is clean and well maintained. As Katy had said, yeah, we need to make it more appealing to people to ride the bus. And I think we should eliminate bus fares completely. Make public transit, make it free.
That's a good idea.
For all people. This is feasible because fares make up a very small portion of Metro's revenue anyway, so why do we have them? We need to improve bus transit by making it more comfortable for people to take the bus, having areas that are safe, and when you're waiting for the bus, and more buses in bus lanes so people can take the bus and they aren't late, and buses are run on time. And once again, they're electric, and that people feel safe on them. Services to make transit more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy?
Great, thanks so much for the question. So to answer the first one, absolutely. I've talked about it in both of my answers to more bus lanes along major corridors. And to the point about the Mobility 2035 plan, all of this is promised bike infrastructure or bus infrastructure that didn't materialize. I think that's an important moment to note that process matters as much as policy, and having transportation and land use decisions run through individual council offices creates an environment that is rife for corruption. We've seen it over and over again, and I think it's timely to point out in the wake of last week's allegations. When you put some civil service distance between elected officials and social policy making, you reduce the risk of corruption, you allow expertise and research to be at the foreground, and you get better results. We really need that distancing on land use and transportation. So that's the first question. To extending the Wilshire bus lane east of the Beverly Hills border? Absolutely. And third, on bus ridership declining, I think it's really important to talk about who is still riding the bus, people who are absolutely reliant on bus service. This is not the time to disinvest in bus service because of declining ridership. It's the time to double down on bus ridership and bus service. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
So let me first say that my family is car light, and I have been biking and busing to UCLA for many, many years. So I have a deep understanding of the gaps in infrastructure on the ground. Yes, absolutely, I will implement bus lanes. You know, we have a whole suite of tools that are in a bunch of plans: all-door boarding, expanded bus waiting areas, in the parking lane, which allows the buses not to have to merge back with traffic, real-time arrival information, bus head starts, dedicated bus lanes. We're not doing any of it because we don't have the political will. I will change that. And yes, the Wilshire bus lanes always should have gone through Condo Canyon. I'll make it happen. And we're losing bus riders because we're not investing in the system. We need to start doing that. We need to start making it a world-class system. We can do that. We're LA.
Thank you. Turning it over to Tiernig for our next question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiernig. I am a everything rider. I use my feet. I use my electric unicycle, my e-bike, the bus, Metro Rapid, rail, anything that's not a car I'm excited about. And infrastructure is a huge part of that. So the question here is about improving infrastructure. Riding a bike or scooter is dangerous in CD5. What we have today is a patchwork of unprotected bike lanes that are in the door zone of parked cars. Under Mayor Villaraigosa, the city aggressively implemented bike lanes wherever they fit without taking space away from cars. Unfortunately, this means the low-hanging fruit is gone, and that any new bike lanes in CD5 would have to be reapportioned from car space. The term road diet became a dirty word in 2017, but the truth is the majority of Angelenos, not just the ones that are usually the loudest in community meetings, want a safe network of protected bike lanes. In 2015, City Council unanimously passed the 2035 Mobility Plan. The plan includes 500 miles of bike lanes, but we've only built 37 miles, 7% so far. Would you commit to implementing a network of safe, physically protected bike lanes in CD5, including letting LADOT implement the mobility plan when opportunities arise? If so, how would you lead on this issue? And how would you deal with pushback from Angelenos that are scared of change and can never see themselves on a bike?
Thanks, Tiernig. Starting with you, Sam.
Tiernig, I think you hit the right word over and over again: safe. A top priority for me as council member will be public safety, and the safety of our pedestrians and cyclists will be a major part of that. Since I haven't had a car for 7 years now, I know how dangerous it is out there for walkers and cyclists. That's not okay. We should feel comfortable and feel safe walking down the street or riding a bike with your family. Los Angeles ranks second in the nation, the number of people killed by cars as pedestrians. The statistics are eye-opening. And fourth, another part of that is infrastructure. 4,000 miles of streets in Los Angeles in disrepair. That's another big part of this. And I think the failure of our city is poor implementation. We refuse to enforce our rules, whether it's not enforcing Airbnb rules, not inspecting oil and gas wells, not making sure the low-income Angelenos get the affordable units that are getting built. It's not okay. We have to do more to make sure that that bikes, cyclists and pedestrians are safe on the streets. And I will do more to protect them through better signage and lighting and crosswalks.
Thank you. Molly?
Okay. Yes, I am completely supportive of implementing a network of safe, physically protected bike lanes. As I've said, I have this idea that I think is pretty cool. And there's lots of sidewalk space that is empty of pedestrians, but of course making it safe. They do it at the beach, right? They have the bike path with the pedestrians, and it all seems to work out. So I believe there is a way. I also am a bike rider. So I think one of the ways to overcome opposition and lead on this issue is get the leaders themselves using public transportation, walking, riding bikes, showing people that it's okay. And we have to lead by example. We have to lead by example. And I haven't been riding my bike as much because of the traffic. And then I end up going up on the sidewalk. So I thought, well, why not be able to coordinate all of this together? So we don't have bikes on streets anymore, and that the pedestrians and the bikers can work together. I think it's possible.
Thank you. Jimmy?
So yes, I absolutely commit to investing in protected bike lanes. Absolutely. What's the point if bike lanes are unprotected such that use is so low that we're not getting the bang for our, residential or real estate buck? I often think about an old friend, Jody Ziegler, who I first learned about Vision Zero from. Some of you might know her. And her daughter was hit by a car while waiting for the school bus. And the tragedy was unthinkable. I'll never forget about hearing about her death. And Jody remained a transit activist for years here, but was constantly running up against a political system built on the car only model. And I think about her death often and how difficult it is to change people's minds. But as I've been through this campaign, I've been learning new strategies. And I think there are 3 that can be really effective. First, take people out on a bike, show them the bike lanes on Santa Monica Boulevard and how intimidating it can be for them. Second, give them a different future to imagine. I talk about the Santa Monica Promenade example often and how that used to be a car place and how much people enjoy the walkability of it. And third, get all voices, not just the loudest and most empowered. Often the views are going to be a lot different when you have more diverse voices in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question about bicycle infrastructure. So what we need to do is build low stress bikeways that are appropriate for ages 8 to 80. So those kinds of bikeways take 2 forms. One is the form that you asked about, which is protected bike lanes or cycle tracks on our major boulevards. The other one is robust bicycle boulevards or neighborhood greenways that use a lot of traffic calming to make them a safe shared space. I'm actually a leader who was able to bring the latter into my community. I conceived a project that is bringing $2.3 million to Mid-City West. It's the first neighborhood council to ever do something like that. We need to build out that network across the district. Other things that we need to do in terms of infrastructure are expand bike share across the district and make sure that we build adequate bike parking in the public right of way across the district at important destinations.
Thank you, Scott. And Katie?
Yes, of course. It's one of the things I'm most excited about the council member job for, because I think we live in Los Angeles. It's mostly flat. It's usually sunny. And most people don't feel safe riding their bike around the corner or down the street or across town. And it feels like a big loss. We live near Olympic and near La Cienega, and we have 3 kids, and we like to ride our bikes, but we literally have to get in the car with our bikes and our bike hitch to take our kids someplace with protected bike lanes before we'll go for a bike ride. And during COVID, it was amazing to see families come out and teach their kids to ride bikes in the street because there wasn't cut through traffic. CD5 has so much cut through traffic. So even taking side streets isn't necessarily safe. So we absolutely need to be doing this. We should be building it all as much as possible at once so that it's not piecemeal, because I think part of the challenge is that people are worried that it's not going to connect to each other. We can fix that.
Thanks, Katie. Turning it over to Kyle.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Kyle, and I'm on the steering committee for Streets for All, and great to have you all here. So Uplift Melrose is a good example of the type of project that the city should be doing in CD5, but didn't get to do simply because Paul Corrett said no. The project would have rehabilitated 1.6 miles of an iconic LA street, Melrose, with wider sidewalks, new shade trees, new lighting, safer crosswalks, and LA's first curb level protected bike lane. Melrose, by the way, has a protected bike lane in the city's mobility plan. So Uplift Melrose would have simply implemented the city's own plan. The project would have been built with 40 million of grants from the state and was widely supported by businesses, schools, residents, the neighborhood council, and many others. If elected, would you commit to implementing the project? What is your response to project critics who suggest it would increase emergency response times and that bike lanes would simply go unused?
Ollie.
Yes, I would support commit to implementing Uplift Melrose. And it was very upsetting that Koretz shot it down. I live, in that neighborhood, and I mean, Melrose does need to be uplifted, and this is a great way. I do not think bike ways, the safe bike spaces will be unused. I think once again, if they are safe and we can gather community, also have town halls and get people's reassurance that it's good to go, I think people will use them once they see how it all works together. I don't think it will be a hindrance to emergency vehicles. And I think it's very, very important that we start taking these community actions and making places safe for all people to walk and ride their bikes. Enjoy the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy?
Thanks so much, Kyle. Yes, I would absolutely commit to supporting Uplift Melrose. It was vetoed because of mythology that first responders can't get through. For any of us who have ever been to Boston or any New England city with their colonial street designs versus the wide grids that we have here, the first responders can get through just fine. This was a fantastic plan. It was approved by 2 neighborhood councils in high income areas who are often resistant to change. That's a feat in and of itself. This is the problem with single council member approval. They can go against the hard fought wishes and plans of the community with the stroke of a pen. It would have made Melrose so much easier to walk on and so much safer. We know that eyes on the street give people more of a feeling of safety than anything. Making Melrose more walkable is a win in every respect: environmental, public safety, commercial walkability for businesses, and general pleasantness. Would have been great if the proposal had included some housing as well. It would be amazing to make housing more accessible in such a transit and job-rich area with good schools. So yes, I would absolutely have supported the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you for the question, Kyle. So yes, I was one of the champions of this project. I was the chair of the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council for 7 years. And was the president of the council when this project came to be. And actually, we were working on making Melrose safer for a lot longer before this project was developed. So yes, this is one of the most dangerous streets in CD5. We've had at least 3 deaths on Melrose in the last few years. This is implementing the mobility plan. And by the way, I would also work with my colleagues to the east to make sure that we build a full Melrose bikeway all the way to Hoover. It's one of the key networks, key bikeways in the city, and it could be one of our finest bikeways. And so, we need to start building collaboration across city council districts. And I think if we have a progressive pro-mobility council member, we can build those relationships from West LA all the way through the Wilshire Corridor.
Thank you, Scott. Katy?
So I'm going to finish what Scott was almost done saying, because I agree with him completely. I think to go even a step further, not only should we be working across council districts, so 4 and 5, but also with cities that border CD5. We've got Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, and the South Culver City. And it should be a seamless experience for people who are riding their bike from one part of the city to the other. It shouldn't, just because you leave the city of Los Angeles doesn't mean the bike lane should also end. Uplift Melrose looks like places we go on vacation on purpose. And it's wild to me that people, I mean, I can understand why people were opposed to it, but I don't think that there's any really good reasons why we couldn't have done it with maybe some more stakeholder engagement and allaying some of the concerns. The very act of greening and slowing down makes communities more vibrant and safe. And so I think we should be doing it. I'm dedicated to this. People who are supporting me are also championing this in other parts of the city, like Megan Solly Wells, Carter Rubin, Jonathan Weiss. They know that I'll make this happen.
Thank you. Sam?
There's no doubt that Melrose has seen better days. Melrose was and should once again be one of the most vibrant places in Los Angeles. And what made Project Uplift such a unique opportunity was the $32 million that the state made available for this project. And I spoke to the broad coalition of supporters, residents, nonprofit leaders, neighbor council groups, business groups. I also spoke with the opponents and listened to their concerns about emergency services and traffic and usage. My job as a council member, one of our jobs as council members, whoever's elected, is to find a win-win solution that advances the community. Our job is not to kill projects that have some opposition. It's not to approve projects and while ignoring the concerns of residents. I have this unique skill set professionally, being both a litigator and also a mediator. I know how to fight, but I also know how to bring people together around shared values and priorities. And that's exactly what I'll do as a council member. I will support a Melrose type project moving forward if those funds are available, and we'll fight for those funds. And we're going to find a win-win for Melrose and for the entire district.
Okay, that is the end of the curated questions. I just realized that I kind of dove into this debate. I didn't even introduce myself, so better late than never. But I'm Michael Schneider. I'm also on the steering committee of Streets for All. I'm the vice chair of the Mid-City West Neighborhood Council, where I chair our Transportation and Sustainability Committee. I'm also on the Metro Sustainability Council and the Bicycle Advisory Committee for the City of Los Angeles. So with that, we're going to go into our audience Q&A. That link at the top, I apologize. We're getting notes that some people are having issues accessing it, but we have a ton of questions from the audience. So luckily it is working for most. And you know what? We didn't even think through the order here. So if we can remember the order down there, the screen's going to flip over to the question. But Jimmy, if you can start this one, followed by Scott, Katy, Sam, and Molly, and then we'll do our best to rotate by memory. Okay. First question is from Lorraine Lundquist. How can we make the implementation of the mobility plan more automatic and guaranteed rather than being so much at the mercy of individual council members? And I'm realizing we didn't plan a timer, so I'm going to go ahead and I see the time right here. So go ahead, Jimmy.
Thanks so much for that question. And it's something I've been talking about throughout the evening, that the fact that individual council members have so much control over land use and transportation decisions just creates a system that incentivizes and allows corruption of individual council members. It's what we saw with Mitch Englander. It's what we saw with Jose Huizar, especially in the land use and transportation context. I think part of the problem is that there's no robust citywide agency that's responsible for these decisions. The division of labor between the Bureau of Street Services and the Department of Transportation, coupled with the tremendous power of individual council members, creates both duplicative people working on the same issue. It creates redundancies, and it also sometimes creates people at odds with each other. One institution putting up bus shelter and one taking it down, one trying to make the street wider, one trying to make the street narrower. So I think collecting those governmental agencies will reduce the power of the individual council member, but it requires commitment. It requires political courage among council members who are not known for wanting to reduce their power, but it's something I'm deeply committed to, because if we don't change, then we'll never get any of this transportation or housing stuff that we're after. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy. And we can be slightly looser with the 1 minute, but we do want to get to as many people as possible. Scott, go ahead.
Thanks for the question, Lorraine. It's a good one. I think we need to change our psychology about how we design our streets. You can see how we've been doing this work. And it's basically, the question is, should we do it or not? Whether, and it's not how. We need to go from whether to how, because we know this work is necessary. So I think that's operationalized with a true implementation plan. We don't have an implementation plan with the mobility plan. We have lines on a map, and we basically have a system where council members can do whatever they want. My point of view is that this work is necessary, that this work is a matter of social justice, that this is a matter of climate justice and the future health of our city. And it starts, frankly, with council leadership. I think we need a new generation of leaders that are willing to charge forward on this work and work together to build networks. It's only going to happen if we build progressive alliances and elect progressive council members.
Thanks, Scott. Katie.
So right now, each council member micromanages LADOT to within an inch of its life, which is not working. I think we need to implement automatic triggers that will trigger the building out of the mobility plan. As Scott mentioned, we have this mobility plan that was adopted a few years ago. We now need to take that and come up with a more detailed bike plan using the mobility plan as the starting point. And I'd like to see that done within the first year for CD5, and also look at first mile, last mile with all these new metro stations coming in so that we have all of that in place when these metro stations open in a couple of years, that we're ready to go.
Thanks, Katie. Sam?
First off, I want to echo Jimmy's excellent point about corruption. The city's failing because of the corrupt people we've elected over and over again. And that needs to change. And it's not going to change by electing more of the same, more insiders. That's why I'm so proud to announce on day one that not taking money from anyone who views this as transactional. So no money from PACs, LLCs, developers, fossil fuel companies. Another second point is the biggest issue facing our city. It's not homelessness, it's not crime, it's not even these mobility issues. It's a lack of accountability. We've let these crooks ruin our city and we haven't done anything about it. And that needs to stop. We need to elect honest, hardworking people who want to fix our city's problems. And we have to, and we as community leaders, as activists, as citizens, we have to make the case why these issues are priorities for us from a public safety, from an economic, from a quality of life perspective, and from a climate perspective. Transportation is fundamentally climate policy. If we make the case, we will win.
Thanks, Sam. Molly.
Thank you. Thanks, Lorraine, for the question. Yeah, I agree with Sam too. It's about why do these council members, individual council members, able to knock down the mobility plan and stop progress in our city? But yes, I believe too, it's from corruption, and I too am not taking any special interest money, and I'm running a green and sustainable campaign, which I think, once again, we need to lead by example. I am an activist, a community organizer, and I want to be a public servant. So I think the mercy of individual council members, that's true, because I think they, at their whim, or some, whatever the corruption is at the time, or special interest is wanting them to move in a different direction, and that happens, and that's what we need to stop. And then I believe even homelessness and affordable housing and things will move. It's like a river that's all clogged up, and once you take that out, the river will flow, and it goes into all the arteries that is necessary for the people to thrive here in Los Angeles. And with the affordable housing, the climate crisis, people and animal welfare, everything will flow once we get rid of the corruption. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. All right, for this round of questions, I'm going to use the timer on my phone, so you guys will hear when it's 1 minute. Molly, we'll start with you since you ended on the last one. The question is, will you remove parking minimums for transit-oriented communities in CD5 or in LA overall?
I believe, yes, I think we should remove anything that is making it difficult in communities, in CD5 or LA, all over, that hinders transit-oriented communities. We have to make things use, like I said, I mean, public transit should be free of charge, and remove parking minimums for transit-oriented communities. And right, because CD5, we don't, each district is not in a bubble. One affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. And yes, we need to cross over in the lines of each other's districts and come together for the greater good of all. So yes, I would remove those, and anything that betters our community and the planet and all the people that live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy?
Thanks so much for the question. Yes, I would work toward reducing parking minimums. I think Donald Shoup, I mentioned him earlier, famous UCLA professor, High Cost of Free Parking, famous book in urban planning. I highly suggest. 3/4 of the people on this call have already read it. Who are we kidding? But I would, one of the great takeaways from that book is the degree to which we incentivize auto transportation. For no other purchase do we subsidize purchasing something like cars. You spend $20,000 on a car, and then you can go and get a permit for super cheap. And the city basically gives you this incredibly valuable real estate. You can park here on city land, totally subsidized. The most valuable city resource we have, which is public land, we give to people as a perk for buying a car. And if you don't have a car, you don't get the perk, which is just nonsensical given the disincentives that we need for auto transportation. So I would absolutely commit to trying to reduce parking minimums. I was sad to see 1401 go down. Such requirements effectively block most small scale, affordable and infill housing because parking requirements are so expensive. They distort the size and shape of commercial architecture, and they render thousands of commercial buildings obsolete. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
So yes, absolutely. And I've been an outspoken advocate on this issue for many, many years. So this is a social justice issue. Basically, we have a situation where we are requiring the production of a luxury product when we create new housing. Think about that. We're all concerned about affordable housing, but we are requiring an amenity that not everybody wants, that increases the cost of construction by 1/3 to 1/2. And we are saying that you cannot build the types of naturally affordable housing that built LA in the 20s through 40s, the bungalow courts, the fourplexes, the duplexes that are still providing dignified living for folks. So this is wrong. We are making it much harder for working people to be able to afford to live in Los Angeles and CD5 because of these parking minimums. Let's be clear. This is not a ban on parking. If we were to eliminate parking minimums, many developers would still build parking. Many people still want it. All we are doing is saying that a different product that is good for some families and some people is legal. I think that's the right thing to do.
Thanks, Scott.
I think that's the just thing to do.
Thank you. Katy?
Yeah, so I think we should consider reducing parking minimums near job centers and transportation that live in the housing that's being built will actually use. So the Fifth has some big job centers, and I think that to the extent we build more housing in and at adjacent to those job centers, we should absolutely consider it. I also think that we really need to focus on TDM and transportation demand management, requiring new housing developments to provide incentives like secure bike parking, free transit passes for tenants, and other TDM tools to ensure that new development isn't increasing traffic as we take away that required parking.
Thank you. Sam?
Transportation is inextricably linked to affordable and workforce housing. And the problem with affordable housing is that it's not affordable to build. Multiple funding sources, a slow, cumbersome process for entitlement. We failed to prioritize them as a city. And the programs that we do have, like TOC, are not doing enough, and many of those units aren't getting to low-income Angelenos. And we also have to fight to protect existing affordable housing, which is exactly what I've done as a board member and pro bono lawyer for Bethesda Legal Services for over a decade. In terms of parking, it makes housing more expensive. Often projects are built with far too much parking. But I've also spoken to residents in CD5 who are concerned about what adding significant housing stocks to neighborhoods would do without any parking, what it would do to their local small businesses. And I don't think we can rely on developers to do the right thing, to build the right number. They'll build what will make them the most profit, which is no parking. So these decisions should be made at the neighborhood level based on the unique needs of every community, not by developers and not by Sacramento politicians. And I'll give you an example in conclusion. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called EDA, which is building housing for adults with special needs on Pico and Rexford near Doheny. We're not asking for very much parking, almost none, because we don't need it. And that's a perfect example of in the right situation on the right block, we don't need parking. So I support reducing parking requirements, but not eliminating them.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, we're going to go to 30 seconds because there's a lot of questions here and we are running out of time. So this time, Sam, you'll start. Here's the question. Will you support or push for a congestion pricing plan with key design considerations for low-income travelers? 30 seconds. Sam.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in the idea of congestion pricing. I think anything that we can do to incentivize the results we want. There's a famous quote, show me the incentives, I'll show you the results. We have to do more as a city, at a county, at the metro level to get people out of their cars. And I think we need to help folks who are low income in this context. So I would support congestion pricing. Obviously, it depends on the neighborhood, depends on the situation, but conceptually, I think it's something that's important for us to explore.
Thank you. Molly?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not sure if it.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. Yes, I will support and push for congestion pricing plan, and with, of course, key design considerations for low-income travelers. I think it's very important that we have equity and that transportation just isn't about and pricing. That it's, you know, it creates that everyone has a way to travel, and especially for the low income travelers who, you know, where it gets more difficult to get around, and we need to protect them and serve all people, no matter where they're from or where they live in what district. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Jimmy?
Yes, absolutely. I hope everybody saw Alyssa Walker's great piece about Governor Hochul in New York's efforts at congestion pricing and how to design it. I think it'll be really important to look at what New York's doing and how successfully they've managed the new congestion pricing. That's going to be the largest in the nation, the first time New York's ever done it. I think absolutely with carve-outs for people with disabilities, people coming to and from medical appointments, total subsidies or reimbursement subsidy works better for low-income workers, and benefits for essential workers who are getting to and from work, as we've seen their importance through the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you. Scott?
Yes, I would be very interested in pursuing congestion pricing. We actually have a really excellent opportunity on the west side of LA, and that is the Sepulveda Pass. So a congestion pricing program that could help us build a subway faster through the Sepulveda Pass. I think that's a very exciting opportunity. And yes, we should be talking about carve-outs for low-income folks. Lots of folks in LA. We're not going to stop being a city where lots of folks rely on cars anytime soon. And we need folks that work in, you know, all kinds of industries that need cars to be able to still afford to go where they're going. So yeah, thanks for the question, Jacob.
Thanks, Scott. Katy?
Yeah, I absolutely believe we need to look at congestion pricing, but only if equity is baked into it. I have real concerns if it's not done right for the reasons that Jimmy and Scott have already talked about. It's in the county sustainability plan. It's in most good sustainability plans. Places that implement it well encourage people to get out of their cars and into transit and alternative modes of transportation. So yes.
Thank you. Next question. How do you plan to deal with homeowner associations who are typically against bike lanes and other mobility options, such as the WSSM and the WNC, who are opposed to bike lanes on Westwood, for example? They seem to have Paul Koretz's ear. How would you respond to pressure from these HOAs? And we're going to start with you, Katy.
Sure. So the council member represents everybody and all sorts of different communities of interest, including homeowners, but also renters and people who would prefer to take bikes if it were safe. And because we have UCLA in the district, I think there's a real need to make sure that we're thinking about students because there's so much turnover and they're not here necessarily long enough to have sustained political power. So I think working closely with campus, the different constituencies there is really important. It's also important to talk to the neighborhood councils and homeowners groups for sure. They're part of they're a constituency. But I think, it's the job of a council member to take all the information, to do the work, and then to make a decision and bring people along and explain why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, for me, it's not a question of if, but where. We're going to have bike lanes on Westwood. Every day, 100,000 cars drive in and out through up Westwood, through the village into UCLA. And when the subway arrives, there's estimates anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people a day are going to ride the subway. And as part of that, we're building major improvements in Westwood through Metro. And just Zoomed last week with folks at DOT and Metro. For example, there's going to be parking for 170 bikes at Wilshire and Gailey at one of the entrances to the subway. So I'm going to convene our friends at the Westwood South of Santa Monica HOA, or the Westwood Neighborhood Council, and Metro and DOT and UCLA and Streets for All, the BID, North and Southwestern Neighborhood Council, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to find the safest, most efficient route because this is the future of Westwood. I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to convince them that this is the right approach moving forward.
Thanks, Sam. Molly?
Yes, I would bring people together. I mean, it's unifying and talking about these issues and trying to get the best decision made by all involved. And as Sam said, I believe too that the future is bikes and clean energy cars and less cars and more electric buses. And so, to deal with the homeowners associations and people who push against this. And like I said, I believe that bike lanes need to be off the street somehow and are.
Thanks, Molly.
Okay, thank you.
Jimmy?
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this if I was not ready for the fight. I've already been public in my opposition to 4118, and I've been publicly in support of denser infill housing, which is opposed by a number of homeowners associations. Taking difficult stands is only going to get harder from here. This is the easiest it's ever going to be to say what you actually think. So I think that my track record thus far in this campaign has already demonstrated the kind of resistance I'll put up against intransigence. I think it's also important to bring voices out. CD5 is diverse. The majority of CD5 is renters, and far more of those renters than we care to admit are 2 paychecks away from an eviction. So bringing those voices out and creating systems that allow their political participation is a big part of what I'll do. It's not quite pushback, it's just bringing more people to the table.
Thank you. Scott?
So thank you for the question. I am very passionate about civic engagement. So I have the most experience of any of the candidates with this. I was the chair of a neighborhood council for 7 years. And I was able to bring many, many new people into the civic engagement process. I think that's a big piece of how you get it done. You can look at my Instagram account and see the diverse faces that are supporting me: Black, Asian, Latino, white, gay, straight, young, old, homeowners, renters. We need to have everybody at the table. And I will say that as chair of my neighborhood council, we supported a road redesign of 6th Street. We supported Uplift Melrose. And so it's possible to build political will for these changes. The other thing that I will say is that we need to ground these policy changes in the inclusive values that I believe most Angelenos share. Westwood Boulevard has more bus riders than people in automobiles. So when we're talking about bus lanes on Westwood
Scott, I'm
Boulevard,
sorry.
we need to talk about justice. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. Let's try to do this without a timer. Just quick yes or no, maybe one sentence. Will you commit to taking public transit at least once a week if elected? And Scott, why don't we start with you?
Yes, I will take public transit every week. I'm going to hop on the subway or the bus rapid transit to get to City Hall.
Katy?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing for electeds to do, to understand how the system's working or not working. Absolutely.
Sam?
Yes, I already take public transit, and I'm going to plan my local field offices near public transportation so I can get there by bus or subway from my home.
Molly?
Yes, I will take public transit and I will also ride my bike.
Jimmy?
Yes, and I hope we can move to a place where taking public transit is less of a novelty and more a part of our daily life.
All right, next question. I apologize. Scott, did you start the last question? I'm losing track.
I'm not sure.
I think you did. So Katy
Okay.
is going to start this one. Will you support the proposed noise cameras to monitor and hopefully support enforcement against the growing vehicular noise, sonic assault of deliberately loud, high vibration muscle cars, and the continuous low droning of pickup trucks? Starting with you, Katy.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. I hear drag racing from my bedroom every night, and it's awful.
Yes,
Sam?
yes, and I will do more. Street racing, drag racing, this is not acceptable in our city, and it's been going on for now 2 years during the pandemic. And I'll use every tool within our toolbox at the city level and with and our allies at the state level to stop this.
Molly?
Yes, I will support this proposed noise issue to monitor and, stop, because yes, I hear it too in the neighborhoods through here on 6th Street, and it's dangerous and it's noise pollution, which we do not need.
Jimmy?
Yeah, my partner is in the chat and he knows that every time a loud motorcycle goes down our street, I bang my fists against the wall. Absolutely. I think talking a little bit briefly just about enforcement is important, though. I think of enforcement is better thinking about infrastructural design. How can we design our cities so that they don't promote this kind of drag racing and that they don't allow automobiles that are this loud to be on the streets? Being proactive about design rather than reactive on enforcement is how I think about social problems. It's how I think about everyone. Enforcement comes with it a host of concomitant issues. People of color always are disproportionately on the receiving end of any said enforcement. So I absolutely think this is a tremendous issue, but we want to be savvy about how we think about it.
Thank you. Scott?
So yes, I do support it. I also, in a related note, support the use of red light cameras. And I want to kind of hop on to what Jimmy was talking about, because whenever we can take LAPD out of the enforcement piece, that makes our Black and brown brothers much safer. And so, red light cameras are used across other cities in Los Angeles County, actually, very successfully in terms of traffic violations. We need to bring that to LA as well.
Thank you. Okay, we're running very short on time. We're going to try to get 2 more questions in, maybe. Let's try to do yes or no with maybe 1 sentence. While not in your direct control, will you oppose all freeway expansions in Los Angeles? Sam?
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to support expanding the freeway. It is just a massive spend of dollars and inconvenience, and it's just not the future. So I know it's not a city issue like you said, but I'd be hard pressed to imagine that's a better use of our dollars.
One of you might be on the Metro board, so it could be an issue. Molly?
Yes, I will not, support freeway growth. I mean, yes, there's so many other things that we can do instead, as we've been talking throughout this whole forum. So there are less cars, and then we don't need to expand the freeways, because it's just become, it's a labyrinth, and it will just get worse and worse. So we have all the tools to do better.
Thank you. Jimmy?
Every time we've ever expanded a freeway in this city, it's hurt communities of color, it's hurt low-income people. Absolutely, cars are not the future. Electric vehicles may be the future of cars, but cars are not the future. So absolutely opposed to freeway expansions.
Scott?
So I would be thrilled to sit on the Metro board, and I will be a champion against freeway expansion. which is climate arson. I mean, it's amazing that we are still considering freeway expansions in Los Angeles when we need to build out our complete street system, when we need to embrace a Green New Deal, weatherize homes. This is a misuse of resources, and it's actually making our problems worse. So that's a measure of how far we are away from where we need to be in Los Angeles. We need new folks that are ready to embrace the future, not the past.
Thanks, Katie.
Batting cleanup, so I'll be brief. Yes, I oppose all freeway expansions for the reasons previously stated. It's not the future.
Let's try to keep this to 30 seconds. What is each of the candidates' experience with biking in LA? Molly, I think you're starting here.
Okay, yeah, great. Yes, because I own a bike, I bike ride. I do my errands on my bike. And as I've said, I go to yoga on my bike downtown LA, but it's gotten very congested and sometimes I get a little freaked out, but so I haven't been biking as much, but yeah, I'm a bike rider and I want to bike more and make it safe for all of us to do so.
Thank you. Jimmy?
I think that we saw at Ciclavia the other day just how wonderful of a bike city LA can be. And I think that, again, much like public transit, biking shouldn't be a novelty. It should be a part of a daily life. Full disclosure, I don't typically bike. I use public transit and we don't go many places these days. So there's not all that much transit happening. I think that the most important thing is having a bike network for bike transit to be a real viable option for people to get to work, to get to the store, to get to the places that they need to go. It has to be a network. I think that really disincentivizes me from bike riding and disincentivizes a lot of other people as well.
Thanks, Scott.
So I do bike in LA and I've seen all sides of it. But biking is part of the way I fell in love with Los Angeles, exploring the streets, and Ciclavia. And I've also commuted by bike for many years. So I understand, feeling that my life is at risk, the rage of, fighting this ridiculous infrastructure and drivers who are exhibiting poor behavior. And so LA could be one of the best biking cities in the world if we just have the will to make it so.
Katie?
Yeah, so it's interesting. For me, it's a pre-kids and post-kids thing. And pre-kids, I used to bike a lot with my husband. We would bike all over the city. And I'm just not safe. I don't feel safe doing it with my kids. We don't live anywhere near protected bike lanes. And it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take right now. And it breaks my heart and I wish it weren't so. And I'd like to make it so that all people with their kids, without kids, can feel safe riding around the city.
Yeah, my experience is actually opposite Katie's. I didn't grow up riding bikes often. I'm not from a biking family, but I've fallen in love with bikes again as a young dad, teaching my kids how to ride their bikes and finding places that it's great and safe to ride. We spend weekends trying to find great places to go. And but I'm more of a jogger. If anyone wants to go for a jog and talk politics, hit me up anytime.
Thank you. So we're now going to move on to closing statements, 1 minute each. And Jimmy, you've got the floor.
Thanks. I had such a wonderful time tonight. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces and to meet some new folks. I'm going to be putting my personal phone number in the chat. Call or text me if you'd like to talk further. Check out our website at jimmybiblarz.com or come to our next Beers with Biblarz event next Thursday. I hear myths all the time. Where are people going to park? LA is a car city. What about the ambulances? Businesses rely on driving. A good campaign is about turning out your people, but it's also about persuasion and public education, educating people about why some of their long-held beliefs may be mistaken. If I've learned one thing, it's that individual conversations, clear and consistent messaging, and real listening go a long way to changing hearts and minds, and that's what my campaign is all about. I want you to know that if elected, equity, accessibility, and climate are at the core of who I am and what I'm about. They'll guide my policy decision-making. Progress requires new policies, but it also demands new policy processes and ending individual council members' veto power over projects. The challenges are real. It'll take real political courage to disrupt homeowner and car owner interests. But I always come back to this. Science and public opinion agree that removing overwhelming physical space for single occupancy vehicles improves quality of life for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you so much to Streets for All for having this robust, excellent conversation. I am running for city council because I believe this moment requires elected officials who are connected to community and committed to progress. That's what I bring to this race. I have been a community leader and been able to make and build real progress for the better part of a decade. And I've gotten lots of new people engaged in politics. That is what we are bringing to this campaign, a broad coalition of folks that are ready for change to make a more affordable city, a more equitable city, a healthier city, a happier city. It's within our grasp. I hope you will join me, scottforla.com. Come to our next urban hike and see, touch, and feel public policy with me.
Thank you. Katy?
It was a pleasure to be here tonight. Thanks to all of my fellow candidates. You know, I've spent the last 15 plus years working on land use, on planning, on climate resilience, on sustainability. Most recently, for the last 6 years at the County of Los Angeles, where we created and implemented a lot of the programs and types of projects that we talked about tonight, whether it's complete streets or green streets, updates to the river master plan, creating the sustainability office, and then adopting unanimously the most aggressive, progressive sustainability plan in the nation that's now a model for cities and counties across the country. So for me, this is deeply personal. I'm running for this seat because I think of all of the ways that one can meaningfully implement change in our communities. The most direct, efficient, effective way is by holding those seats of power and electing people to those seats who have the skills, the temperament, and the experience to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Streets for All, for convening this really important discussion. I've really enjoyed talking about these topics and these ideas with my fellow candidates. And I commend you all for this really civil conversation and putting yourself out there to run for office. We've spent a lot of time talking about the challenges and missed opportunities in our city's many problems. But despite all that, Los Angeles is a great place, not because of the beaches or studios or the weather, even in case of days like today, but because of our incredible people. But for far too long, the people who've run our city have not reflected the energy, creativity, integrity, and diversity that define us as Angelenos. Instead, a bunch of insiders have driven our city into the ground. The elections in June are our chance to elect new leadership, our chance to elect a fighter, not just another insider. Our campaign is about fighting to turn Los Angeles and all of CD5 around for everyone. And we know we aren't getting out of this mess by doing the same thing over again, by following the same script. We're honored that leaders like Congressman Henry Waxman, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and more than 1,000 community leaders in CD5 have recognized our service and endorsed us. You can learn more about me at samforla.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly?
Yes. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I've seen the demise of the city. And I really am running to be a public servant for the people, the planet, and the animals. And so I also, I organized the Green Dream campaign, which was asking the Democratic Party to go green and sustainable and live up to their platform. And one of their things was asking leaders to ride their bike and to carpool. So I think it's really important for the leaders to be examples. And Los Angeles has done a good job setting ambitious goals, but a poor job of meeting them, which we've discussed. It's not enough to have mission statements without a plan that can be put into action and oversight to ensure accountability. As your council member, I will make it a priority, dedicated bike lanes, implement plans to make public transportation a more viable option for all Angelenos, and be willing to utilize experimental and innovative solutions to transportation problems. Molly, LA, 2022.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, so we're now going to ask the audience to take a poll, and the question's very simple. Which candidate had the most inspiring ideas? You could scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go to Slido, that's slido.com, and enter number 858461. We're going to give people about a minute to do this. And since we have your captive attention candidates, we're going to go ahead and play a video for a campaign we are going to publicly launch next week. So this campaign was inspired by Transportation Alternatives campaign in New York City. They launched it about 8 months ago, and every single person running for mayor in New York signed on to it. And Eric Adams, who's going to be the next mayor in New York, just announced a proposal for, among other things, pedestrian improvements, bus lanes, 300 miles of protected bike lanes in New York City in his first term. So this is meant to be inspirational, but it's also meant to be actionable and be implementable. I do want to mention that we gave all the candidates the opportunity to sign on before tonight. So far, Scott and Jimmy have signed on, and we hope that the rest of the candidates sign on. It would be very meaningful to us and to our city. So with that, I am going to go ahead and go to our last slide, which is the poll results. Oh, before that, our next mobility debate will be for Council District 13, and that will be November 15th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. We'll start publicizing that next week, so mark your calendars. All right, let's go to the poll results. Okay, so Sam is in the lead at 38%, Scott at 26%, Katy at 21%, Jimmy at 14%, and Molly at 1%. And it looks like people are still voting. All right, with that, I really want to thank the candidates. This isn't easy. We didn't give anybody the questions in advance. So thanks for being with us, for thinking on your feet, and for spending time. Your voices really do matter. One of you is going to represent this massively important district in our city, and your words matter here tonight and to our community and people that care about these issues, and we really thank you for your time. So with that, I'm going to wish everybody a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Good job, Michael. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.